I'd like to spend a few minutes sharing how I would plan to do the summary of the summary response essay for the John Green essays from the Anthropocene Reviewed. The Bonneville Salt Flats essay that he has in his book and was part of the podcast isn't one that you're assigned, but I hope by going through this, you'll have an idea of how to get started. Because as I've said before in class, one of the worst things in the world is having a blank page in front of you. I talked about the steps. Read the essay, listen to the podcast, pick out key sentences, paraphrase those key sentences, look for threads. In the essay, I'm going to go over the Bonneville Salt Flats. I think there's elements of a good marriage, there's literary quotations, there's observations about humans' place in the universe. And keep that list handy because I think those observations will also be useful for the response. The essay, not the podcast, but the essay begins with this quotation about third things and how third things are essential to marriages. They are objects, practices, games, things that provide a site of joint rapture and contentment or contentment. And they come together when both elements of the members of the couple give them proper attention. He gives examples of John Keats' poetry, the Boston Symphony Orchestra, children. Okay. All of those can be third things. But I think third things are essential to almost any relationship. Almost any relationship is part of third things. And so that might be something for the response. But this quotation and some other quotations, I think, are a thread that tie the Bonneville Salt Flats essay together. And it should be something I would want to note in the summary. He gives an example of when he and his wife were first developing their relationship and they were reading a novel and having a two-person book club, and they had the same quotation: the pleasure isn't owning the person, the pleasure is this: having another contender in the room with you. Both he and his wife liked it, and once again, it's one of the threads. It's a quotation that ties this thing together, and I believe it's an example of a third thing. And then he gives more personal examples. The kids are critical sites of joint rapture, the Sunday New York Times crossword puzzle, on and on. He gives these examples on and on of the third thing, and the first third thing was art. So now third things tie the essay together, and any summary will have to discuss third things and Green's view of third things. Quotations also tie it together. There was the Hall quotation, there was the Roth quotation about owning a person, there's this Herman Melville, a colorless all color for white, and that white shadows forth the heartless voids and immensities of the universe. All of those are important elements of this essay and should be at least mentioned. You don't quote everything. You're going to say he quotes Hall, he quotes Roth, he quotes Melville as examples of literary quotations tying this together. He also quotes an old lady named Marjorie who said that separate checking accounts are key to a good marriage. And so there's a contrast. And again, Green adds a bit of humor to a relatively serious subject. How do you hold marriages together? The other thing that Green does quite frequently is makes personal observations. Things about adulthood is that you are your current self, but you're also all the selves you used to be. I think probably people my age are finding that out every day. I think people your age are starting to find that out every day. That you can't escape the 12-year-old you were, or the 8-year-old you were, or the 16-year-old you were. I can't escape the 12-year-old I was, or the 35-year-old I was, or the 54-year-old I was. I grew out of some of it, but I never quite got rid of it. And then he also makes a big picture observation. Humans are not protagonists of this planet's story. Humans tend to believe, despite all available evidence, that the world is here for our benefit, but the main character is life. And I think Green does a great job with that observation of the big picture, going back and talking about third things and how third things maybe help us find our place and maybe help tie everything together. So he's got these huge, big philosophical musings that I would have to mention. Again, I am not going to quote this word for word. I'm going to try to paraphrase it. I'm going to try to put it in my own words. I'll react to it in the summary, but I will mention that he makes personal observations and he makes some big picture philosophical observations. Remember, the summary is going to paraphrase. So every one of the quotations I have up here is going to be put in my own words if I write the summary. Everything I do here is going to be mentioning, just very simply, that he uses literary quotations. He makes big picture philosophical observations. He makes personal observations. I'm going to just mention that in the thesis that that's what he does and move on from there. Remember, the summary is in your own words. The summary is objective. The summary is what happened. And then take all of this and respond to a couple parts of it. But I'll talk about that in the response element here in, the next slide presentation. Again, hope everyone has a good day and hope to see you all in the next class period.